welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. Taylor and Malcom Bruce. How are you?
I'm really well, Sean. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
How
You're
was
on. You're promoting the monkey, the Laughing Monkey. You're in
Yes,
England, right?
absolutely.
That's where you're calling from today, or zooming from?
I'm in North London, as we say. There is a difference between North London and South London. Um, so there you go. Like if I was in South London, I'd say I'm from South London. If I'm from North London, I'd say I'm from North London. So
We have that too. I'm from the north. I'm from the north, and I went to college, as you were saying earlier before we talked, in the south, and there was a big difference. They say we talk fast up
yeah.
here. I'm like, we think fast. That's all.
Well, you're if you're in like Connecticut, that's kind of
Yes.
to me that's it is the north, but then there's
Hmm.
a vast expanse of further north to where you are,
Oh yeah.
up to like New York, Albany, and then all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, the US is a big country, right? I mean, that's the incredible thing about it.
I,
It's
I I hear that. Yeah, it's
very
pretty big
large.
compared to
A
everybody
lot
else.
of
It feels like it's pretty big.
yeah,
You know.
it's like a series of countries within one country. Whereas, we have Europe, I guess, the UK, although we've severed ourselves from Europe recently, but we're still geographically part of it. So, we just kind of like the whole of Europe and the UK is like the same as the US. It feels like to me anyway. So
It used to feel like that. I'll be honest. Yeah, once the guys started the Brexit, everybody started cutting up the countries, and you need passes and this and that. I think it became kind of unfriendly for artists. I think it's equally unfriendly there for musicians that are traveling as it is for artists to come into America with taxes. Like it feels like nobody's working with the musicians for traveling anymore.
I mean, it's very yes. I mean, when I've spent a lot of time in the States working, but I usually have this thing. It's called an O1R visa, so you have to sort of petition U.S. government, and it used to be when I first started coming over, I would get it be awarded it for 3 years, and I could
Hmm.
develop my career. So I just say, "Hello, U.S. government. I'm a musician, and here's the stuff I've done so far, and I'd like to develop my career in your wonderful country." And they say, "Okay, great. We'll stamp your passport, and you can come here in and out for 3 years, working as long as you pay your taxes." And they have deals with taxes between the two countries and all of that kind of stuff. But now you have to sort of you have to kind of show exactly what you're doing, and they only really give it to you. So you have to book a whole tour in advance and then submit that, and they'll give it to you sort of for that period of time. So it's really much more complex in that sense. It's less user friendly. I don't know why
And it's
they've
expensive
tightened it
too.
up. Oh
You
man,
know.
it's like 3-4 grand each time. Yeah.
Yep.
So
And if you do paperwork and you get the whole band over, and then you guys get taxed in, and your merch gets taxed in, and then it gets taxed out. And I always tell people,
yeah,
any country or American, if you got a band you like playing, go see them. Go see them. Support them because it's a dying breed, and it's not the same anymore.
yeah.
It's even more of a challenge financially. Some bands just come over and tour even over here just if they can break even, just to get the exposure to their fans. It's not even so much about the big bucks anymore. It's just that they can just break even, make a couple bucks. You know.
Yeah, I mean, there's those different levels of the industry. Obviously, there is still lots of money to be made, but it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, but these are the fundamental questions about life right now. Are we're living in a kind of capitalist society where we've just all got to compete, or is there a bit more of a breathing space for art? It's those are fundamental questions. I guess it's always been about surrounding creativity in that sense. Because artists just want to make art and they want to be accepted for that and have a forum for being heard within their creativity. But then suddenly it's like you're compromise you might have to compromise your creativity to get on in the business because the business side of it has
You always have to. I
expectations.
think once you make a dollar, when somebody hands you a dollar bill, you
Yeah,
have to compromise yourself
which
somewhere.
was that
Something's doing
first that
something to you.
first records that first record's amazing, and then the industry gets hold of it, and by the second and third record it's churning out sort of generic music just so that they can go ka-ching, I suppose.
Yeah,
I
if
mean,
you
I'm not
if
saying
you
that's
follow the
with
guy.
every
No,
artist,
no,
but
no. If you it's all that's the problem. Or the a band creates something great, and then the rest of the band members want to be part of it because they see the money, and then the band's sound
yeah.
changes because the guy's like, "All right, you guys can write songs with me." Everyone's like, "It's not the same album." He's like, "Well, I'm trying to be a band team player." And everyone's writing it, and it was me writing this before. So there's so many like different dynamics to it, also, where it's just the internal, the external. And this is going to be
Yes.
a good lead in because what we're promoting today, um, your dad, well known. You want to talk about so this album we're actually doing is Heavenly Cream, an
Yeah,
acoustic tribute album. Jack Bruce, fantastic musician, and as I've learned from hearing this album and learning back, you yourself as are a talented multi-interest musician yourself. So people know we will be back with him on another day to go deeper into his stuff. But we got to promote this album today. So
absolutely. Well, we're really
without
excited
further
about it.
ado,
It's been,
yeah,
yeah, well, it's been a long time in the making. We started this record, Heavenly Cream, at the end of 2017. And it was Pete Brown who was one of the chief lyricists for the band Cream back in the
mm-hmm.
60s. He started the project off with the label called Valley and then brought me in and Rob Cass, the producer, Mark Waters, who's shot a making of feature-length documentary that's being released at the same time as the album. And it was all we made the record in Abbey Road, so it was a really, really special experience for all of us. And we just had some wonderful people on the record: Joe Bonamassa, Paul Rogers, Ginger Baker, Maggie Bell from Stone the Crows, Deborah Bonham, who is John Bonham's sister, Bobby Rush, who is a legendary singer in from your country.
Yep,
So yeah, just think lots and lots of Bernie Marsden and Neil Murray
yeah.
from Whitesnake, and the list goes on. So yes, it was really exciting to put it all together, and quite a big task, really.
The concept of like the album, like where did it had to come from somebody? Was the label just like big Cream fans, and then from there it just expanded? They started reaching out and grabbing pieces and parts and saying this would go here like a puzzle, or was there like a master plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, as I say, it was Pete Brown was he was talking to the record label about there's actually a documentary about Pete Brown's life called White Rooms and Imaginary Westerns, which still hasn't been released, but that's a whole separate thing talking about Pete Brown's life in music and as a poet and a songwriter and a lyricist. And
Sounds cool.
my dad, all the guys from Cream, so my dad, Eric Clapton, and Ginger Baker, they're all interviewed in this documentary. And Martin Scorsese's in the documentary because Scorsese has always used Cream songs in his
Yep.
movies, usually at the most gruesome moment where somebody's, going or something. Joe Pesci's stabbing someone in the eye with a pencil or whatever it is. Um, so that they were talking about that documentary, but then I think they sort of started discussing how about we do a new project, a tribute to Cream, and rather than do the kind of obvious thing, which would be just versions of the songs, why don't we
Right.
do an acoustic version? Because that hasn't really been done before. And when we say acoustic, it's not like singer-songwriter acoustic, which I love that genre. But it's not
No, but
like
it's
a
important to
solo.
point out because I was going to point that out too. Because when I first read that, when I got this sent to me, it said
Yes, you
acoustic. I
might
was
have
like,
thought.
I was a little nervous, a little anxious because
Yeah,
I'm like,
there's a guy
it
in the
could,
corner playing a djembe, and no, it's not
which is
like
not
that.
bad. Like when people do reimagining, but for me, I'm like, there are certain parts of Cream's music that has to be a certain way to me, and I'm not
Yeah,
hardcore about everything, but there's certain things that are just like my favorite parts of the song. I mean, you can't take everything out.
absolutely. Well, it's riff-based blues rock music, so you
Right.
can't really kind of just go, okay, I'm gonna. I mean, a song is a song, and you can arrange it in all kinds of ways, but I think it is important to point out, this is a fully orchestrated,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
but with the proviso that we weren't allowed to play an electric instrument. So but it's got horn arrangements, it's got drums, bass, guitar, vocals, piano, and Abbas Dodu, who's an amazing African Ghanaian percussionist. He's playing
Mm-hmm.
on a lot of the tracks as well. So yes, it's really fleshed out and full sounding, but not an electric instrument inside. So
For you now, becoming part of it, is there a I always think it's hard. I talk to a lot of musicians who are it's in the family, but they also have people on the outside. I don't know if it's gotten better, being the son or an artist of an artist that's famous. It's like because you're starting out, you're your own person, and right, you're a great musician, but your father in any field has always started out somewhere else. Like it's almost like you're already, no matter what you do, he's not good enough or he's good enough. I mean, I talk to Weasel Sal, I do stuff with him. They compare him to Frank all the time. They're both fantastic musicians. It's not even fair to compare musicians like that. But then doing an album on
Yeah.
top of it, was that even more of a like, you're like, well,
Well, I mean, I think Dweezil, he's a great example of that because he's a
yeah.
fantastic musician, guitarist, but he sort of embraced it as well, right? He's been touring
Oh, he's owned it. He actually
Zappa
took
Plays
time to relearn
Zappa
and
and
learn it. Yeah, learn. He stopped playing guitar. He learned it
and
backwards again, just to do it.
yeah, and but I mean, he did, and he's done it marvelously, very successfully. I've seen,
Hmm.
I haven't seen it live, but I've seen stuff, and it's wonderful. But he's also does his own thing,
Yep.
and I think
So
I think it is a challenge when you have a parent that's so successful to find your own way. But so it's a balance. You want to embrace and pay tribute, pay homage to your parent, which is what we all do. But at the same time, I mean, I feel like even though I'm not 12 anymore, I feel like I'm just beginning. I'm just starting out, and
mhm.
I'm exploring and finding ways. And as you mentioned, I've got a record that I'm working on at the moment that's going to come out next year, and I want to make a big splash with it. Um, and learning how the industry works, all of those things. It's a crazy time, right, in the world. It's a
Mhm.
crazy time across the board in the world. Things are sustained, credit is sustaining things, but the world is all kind of fluctuating, and there's a lot of instability. So we have to find stability within ourselves, I suppose. And then project that and to each other. It's a music industry is a microcosm of the same kind of energy in the world. So it's nice to have tradition and history and sort of hold on to those things. And I think Cream was such a wonderful band. They created some wonderful music, and so it's nice to pay tribute to them. But I think at the same time, I don't want to do that for the rest of my life.
No,
I
you
don't want to
shouldn't
get
have
caught
to.
up in it. But I think this record is a special thing because it's not really. I played a very much a supportive role in it. It's not about me putting myself in the front at
Right.
all.
But
In
you are
fact, I kind
singing, right? Was it track four, right? Is it
I'm
track four
singing
you're
on
singing?
one track. Um,
We're going wrong. I'm trying to look at the number here,
we're going
right?
wrong, yeah. But I mean,
Oh, that's so good. That's like one of my favorite tracks, actually.
it's yeah. I mean, but in a sense, I didn't even really want to do that. I just, you know, I'm kind of I wanted to be a supportive person in this project, and I think we did really well. We got a really nice group of musicians that all made sense for the record. That a lot of them had a connection. Even Joe Bonamassa in the sense that
Oh yeah.
he is at the pinnacle of the blues rock tradition in the contemporary sense. He's kind of the guy now, the guitar player in that world that's had that level of success. So for him, it's nice for us that he sort of gives Cream a nod at this point in time. Although he did do a show with my dad, and he's done stuff with Eric, I think, as well. So it kind of fulfill, completed the circle for him
Full
to do
circle.
a
Yeah.
couple of tracks with Ginger. Um, so yes, I mean, I think it's just really nice to get this out there, and it's different. It's not, we have the original recordings and many live shows from the band. They were 1966 to 68, so it's almost like coming up to 60 years ago or whatever. So
I know, right?
it's crazy, isn't it? But so we've got all of that stuff, and I don't think it's necessary to compete with it because it's so good. There's no point. It's not like we can improve it. It's already perfectly formed. So this is a fun way of paying tribute, just taking a different approach, and I think we did okay.
I think you guys did great, and I think I like the fact you did sing on it and you did play different instruments because I get to hear your voice and I got to hear how it fits. And that song actually has a little bit more of a different imprint on it too, has a different feeling on it, which I kind of like actually. It feels like to me that kind of stuff's a little bit to the side. It honors it, but of some of the songs, it feels like it has a little bit more
Yeah,
of a feeling in it than 100% going straight down the road doing and I don't think also you're competing with music. Sports is competing. I think with music you can do it honored, you can do different versions of it. You do it because you enjoy it. Hopefully, you're not doing it for the record label, or you're re-recording your music to get your rights back because the record label took them off the first album. But generally, you're doing it because you love it. you know,
No,
and that's not competition.
I think maybe I think there's a bit of a kind of testosterone element to rock music, you know, the blues rock thing, you know, with
Yeah,
guitar
yeah.
players and wailing vocalists. And I mean that's it's gorgeous, you know. I mean testosterone is an important aspect of the humanity, you know, without it we wouldn't be very far. But you know, that's very much perhaps put to the side in this record. It's a much more
Hmm.
sensitive and about the songs rather than wailing guitar solos. And yeah, I think that's what I meant, that Cream's music, along with a lot of the other classic rock bands of that time, when you play those songs, and I have many times live, you can really get into some heavy exploration. um so this is a bit different. This is more just really kind of the kind of shape of the songs and the sensitivity within the orchestration and things like that. So yes, I mean, We're Going Wrong is an interesting example. It's an incredibly simple song, but there's so much within it, you know, that we can bring out just with dynamics and the instrumentation. So yeah, it was
Very,
exciting.
very moody. It's a very moody song. It's very emotional. I think you hear it. It sounds great. It sounds even better in headphones. I think the album sounds good in headphones. I mean, I think, you know, my test is always like, does it sound good in earbuds? Does it sound good in my good headphones? Does it sound good if I'm mowing the yard, if I'm driving the car? Like, where's this music find place in my life? Because there's always music somewhere, you know. But if you do all the different testing on it, you can really kind of tell like where the album falls. You know what I mean? Sonically, if you can hear it and enjoy it everywhere, it's produced well because it's hard to balance out for all speakers. I think this album does good,
Yes.
you know, on that. You know, it it sounds
Well, I
great.
mean, we're
Enjoys
really
chord.
lucky to be in Abbey Road. I mean, that's just it does have that iconic sound. The actual rooms sound a certain way. As we weren't in the big room, Studio One, but we were in Studio Two and Studio Three. So the Beatles studio and the other one, and certainly the Beatles room has a sonic depth to it, I guess. So
Mhm.
you can, whenever I hear something that's recorded in that room, you can sort of hear. I mean, that to me is what great recording can be. Obviously, there's lots of different approaches to
Right.
production, but you know, we tend to think, oh, I've got a laptop and I can use samples, and I can do this and I can emulate things. But when you actually get in a room, and Abbey Road is a great example of that, but of course there are many great studios. When you're in a room, if you know how to use mic placement, you can create that sort of depth. And then if you can capture that and maintain it through a mix, that to me that makes a record special. But you're right, some in a certain situation you might be listening to it and you think, I can't hear any of that depth. And then in
Mhm.
another situation, suddenly all of that depth comes out, and compression has a lot to do with that. You
Right.
know,
The whole
it's
mix.
interesting
Where,
like
yeah.
how different something might sound on the radio, or like, you know, I've done a couple of these podcasts over the last few weeks, and people have, you know, put a song up, and I'm hearing it from another person's point of view because they are putting it into their sound system, and
Mhm.
they might be compressing it to balance with the talking or whatever. Yeah, it's just very
Yeah.
interesting, all of that stuff.
I remember, especially when I was working in the studio, the first thing you do is we would make something, we'd mix it down, and you go out to the car and play it in the car, then go back out and go in it. Because it's usually the best test, especially when you're in rock in the 90s, because you're like, does it sound good in the car? Because it's generally the main spot people want to hear
Yes,
it, you know? Yeah. That's what the
and
mixing
also
test that
those
you do.
the little you know, the 2-inch tape machines, the 24
Yeah.
track machines. Some of them will have the little speaker in the bottom as well, like
Yeah.
just a little sort of crappy little speaker. So yeah, I mean that's a good test as well.
Well, you know, and it's
But
funny because that would be the test. Like a crappy song with a really good mixture would be can be you kind of make it better with a good production. A really good song with a bad production can take away from it. But when you get a good song like a Beatles song and a good thing like this Abbey Road, just an easy example for people, then it just explodes. Where you can do it. I mean, you
yes,
can't do everything on your laptop. You can do a lot on your laptop. You can't do everything on your laptop, especially drums. And especially if you can get in a room with people, it's even better. There's a feeling, there's something that it's energy that you don't get. You know, I don't think, you know,
yeah. I mean, I think we still haven't beaten I mean, this is an opinion that's probably shared by a great many people, but I think that if you track with a Neve, you track with Neve preamps. So
Mhm.
1081 has that kind of mid frequency EQ that's so unique sounding. So if you track or a 1073 or a 1081 preamp, um, and then you mix on an SSL, like that's the sound of a record, really.
Yeah.
Um, we haven't, of course, there are APIs and all different kinds of things as well, but which are also amazing. But really, that Neve SSL sound is we haven't beaten that yet in terms of sonics, in terms of the what we can create, in terms of detail and detail in the sonic spectrum, or however you want to describe it. So yes, I mean we can emulate that. I've got Pro Tools myself, and I've got lots of plugins,
But
and
you're
they're really
emulating
good.
stuff.
But
But
you know, yeah,
because
I've got
it's
all
cost
that.
effective and stuff too, and the equipment's not out there anymore, so you can get pretty close to it.
Yeah,
And I think, and this actually says we were talking earlier before the show, break the fourth wall with Scorsese and like the music of Cream. There's something very in the music. The sound is so rich and deep, and when the Scorsese songs, I mean, the movies are very also very deep, so they really hold well to each other. So the recordings, the quality back then was done a certain way, and it holds to a timepiece. And also, this, you hear the music of Cream, you think of a certain time period, of the 60s and 70s,
yeah.
and it feels like very powerful. And it feels like you feel like it's the 70s, right? It's something you can feel it's going to change. You feel the change in the music, like you just feel like everything's exciting and on the cusp. Well, I do. But so when you
Absolutely.
hear that in a movie, it kind of brings the extra with it, you know. And the production's a big part of that.
No, and I think, I mean, all to me, all great movie making of that nature, you can do so much with songs. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I just off the top of my head, I'm thinking the movie Blow with Johnny Depp,
Yeah,
because it's such an amazingly interesting movie. It's not a perfect movie, but um, but that kind of era of uh, a, a drug dealer dealing marijuana, and then it moves into the cocaine era, and the music
goes with it.
shifts, and suddenly they're all, you know, it's like the physicality of it changes from like, hey, we're in the 60s and smoking weed, to like, hey, we're really all completely uptight, listen, kind of uh jittery.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's incredibly effective how music can set the scene, as you say, in different eras. And as we now have a little bit more space between the birth of the recorded, early recorded music or popular recorded music, we've got quite a lot to choose from. And I think, yes, it is fascinating what you can do.
As I say that, I think to myself, I'm like, you know what? I don't know if there's like a lot of songs that are picking music from. It's not a dig towards it, but like past some of the bigger bands in the '90s, like your Nirvanas and Soundgarden and stuff. But a lot of the other bands, you might hear songs in movies, but the '90s was weird for music. It also was so weird for clothes. Um, those giant pants are so crazy. Um, I was just saying about those. Like every time I think about it,
Oh,
I
the
gotta think for
jeans,
a minute.
the jeans
Yeah,
era.
the crazy jeans. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I guess what I'm saying is the music doesn't. I don't think there's like a music of that era because there's like so much different stuff. Like everything was finding itself, and you were throwing it against the wall. '80s you would hear like for metal or rock, and like for '70s you hear that, and you think of Cream, and the '50s and '60s like doo wop, and then you can think of like the Vietnam, the music, and like there's all kinds of stuff going on, and Stones and Beatles. But like mid to late '90s, you're like in 2000. I can't think of a music that's kind of jumping out. If I heard it in music, I'd be hearing, oh, I know that song, but I don't feel a generation like
Yeah, I mean, I
Cream can
think
do.
maybe I mean, I always think of maybe bands like Radiohead, for me anyway, that would, I would say, like when
Early
I
'90s
first
for me.
became, yeah, I sort of became aware of bands like Radiohead. But you're right. I think the 80s is very
That's
definitive. It has a sound, right? It has a very much has a sound. It's that early music technology that was, sequencers, Roland sequencers, and the Yamaha DX7. And I'm going to get all technical here, but these kinds of instruments that had, even though they were really horrible in a sense, you know, because they were kind of early digital technology, but they
Right.
still had a personality. Um, and we've grown to love them, even though it's like, wow, that DX7 piano sound or whatever it was, I can't even
It's on
remember.
every album. I know, right? But I said
It came,
yeah, even Radiohead though I think is even earlier on. I think they may have gotten big over time, but to me that's when I first saw them earlier on. So
mhm.
it's still a time period for me, and maybe because generationally it's different for me. Like people may have a certain grunge or new wave or whatever it might be for them. But I'm talking
Yeah.
big movies that we watch generationally now. I don't know. That'd be like a rom com or something nowadays. I don't know if there's a is there another Scorsese anyhow coming out to do next big generational movie like what I mean?
Yes. No, but I think we have moved into a different era. Um, it's like postmodernism, and you know, postmodernism is not modernism. I mean, you could look at the classical music tradition in a similar way, you know, so
Yeah.
and jazz as well. You know, I think we're only at the beginning of everything, but we're now faced with a lot of questions, unanswered questions about technology, about artificial intelligence. You know, we've been using artificial intelligence forever. You know, I guess a pencil might be, you know, a piece of paper. You know, it's artificially
I was going
manufactured.
to say
I
the
mean,
people running record labels would be artificial intelligence, but that's just
well, they're just lacking in. No, well, not all of them, but you know, what I mean is like as we're moving forward, you know, where are we going to head?
right,
Where I can, you know, I can write something into a computer and it will just do it all for me, rather than
right.
having to have a skill. But then it's always been that dynamic between, you know, how can I? It's the end result that counts. You know, it's not you know that I've got 14 degrees so you've got to take me seriously.
Hmm.
It doesn't, you know, it's the profundity of it's the weight of the idea that matters. It's not the technical ability or the skill, or it's really just ideas when it comes down to it. That's what's important. Especially as we kind of gain distance from things,
Yeah,
the value of things is not based on a superficiality. It's based on something real and authentic. So I don't know if we start losing that. If we go into transhumanism, which looks like there's certainly a lot of entities that want us to move more into, you know, we've got Zuckerberg talking about, you know, mixed reality is here to stay. You know, it's like, okay, so we're all going to wear a headset and we're going to start existing in sort of the virtual world and the real world. I mean, all of that's really fun, but I think we have to be a little bit cautious because of you know, our spirituality, like our physiology, our connection to self, and what that means, and how that affects our behaviors, and you know, art is a reflection of so many things, I suppose. So
I
it's
think people are
interesting.
burned out already. I almost wonder. I
Mm.
think there's more pushback to that stuff than I thought there was going to be. Because like even Facebook, people are like, oh, like social media is already artificial reality is already is Facebook or Instagram what people share because it's not real. Like everyone's already living false reality. So just seeing it like a
Yeah,
movie, it's just another is an app, is another device, is a cost you got to pay for. And you bring it back to music.
it's that
How
deflation of
yeah, right. But how different is music now? Like you can say like you could write something now and not have to play something. I could probably I wouldn't on the air. I could name 100. I sat down a piece of paper at least artists that can't read music or can't do this kind of music, but they have some of the best songs, multi platinum.
yeah,
But they still couldn't. So it wouldn't
yeah,
make a
yeah.
difference now or then. The artists, a lot of these artists make their money. They have to make it touring, or now they've opened their own label, their own thing, and they service 1,000 people instead of 100,000, and they're making more money. So they weren't making any good money back then either, except for the handful of artists like now. So there still is that uneven dynamic of the artist not getting paid, just like back in the day, except there's more contracts. You could advertise more. There's less people to compete with, but the contracts are so weird, and the skill level's kind of the same. But now it's just more technology to sort through, to deep dive, and then to compete to get it out there because everyone's on the box yelling. But it doesn't
Yeah,
think
and
it's so different. And also,
it's oversaturation, and I think artists, the assumption is that artists are going to spend 2, 3, 4 hours every day doing social media, doing self-promotion on social media, posting things, posting them to something else, and then replying to people that are writing underneath those things, and then you're competing with artificial intelligence that's spreading all of that for artists that have got bigger budgets than you, and it's just it's got nothing to do with the creative
Right.
process anymore. So finding the time to be creative and to have the freedom in one's mind and heart to not be stressed out about money and all that. So again, going back to the fundamental thing of like, what is this experience that we're going through, and what is it that we should all just be competing? But what are we competing for at this point anyway? Like, if it was a simpler time, and it was like, okay, who can write the better song? Who can write the song that's more appealing, that's got more of a universal appeal? And then the record company goes, wow, we really like that, we're going to get behind it. And there's still that infrastructure up to a point, but a lot of it's disappeared. And it's just now who's got enough money. It's got very little to do with the skill or the creativity. It's got everything to do with who's got the bigger budget to push everything out the way
Right.
and just take over corner of the market. And so you've got these huge artists, and they're not bad. I mean, who's to say, Taylor Swift or Ed Sheeran or all of these kind of artists that are huge global stars? They're great, but there isn't any middle ground. The middle ground is
You're
disappearing
right. You're right.
because there's just
You're either a
no
superstar or
space
you're
for it.
nothing.
Yeah,
Right.
and but also just the what is creativity? It's like this generic stuff that fills up space. Or maybe like, let's hold back a bit and actually what are we saying? What are we saying? Are we just filling a space with and playing it safe all the time? But there are actually perhaps really maybe never before in our history, there are really, really important things to express and talk about in creativity. Perhaps I'm not saying that everybody should be political or make social commentary, but in a way, it's just, I mean, to me, subjectively, we're in an incredible time right now in the world. Just so much
Yes.
going on. Well, and we're like, how are we going to survive? Because there's so much polarity and violence and hatred and uptightness, and about who's right and wrong, and all of these things that are just so superficial to truth,
Mhm.
because truth doesn't function like that. Truth is the allowance. It's allowing things to just be how they are. There are different ways of being, and not everyone has to be the same. And what, you're not the same as me, right? I'm gonna do something about that. So like, this is what's going on,
Yeah.
and we're losing touch with our sense of pro- propriety. Something, I don't know what we're losing our sense. It's losing our sense of self. We're losing our sense of balance. And so maybe as artists, we've got to, as you say, people are getting jaded. Let's pull back. Let's go back to a bit more tree hugging, a bit more sort of
Well,
just
it
real
can be very
things.
grassroots. I think one of the things I made the phrase said it once, I kind of corrected, but I still said it. I think the world's on fire and on level. I'm not even doom and gloom saying it's on fire, because everyone's so angry about things and this and that and polarized. There's so much more things going on right now, but it's always been wars and fights. But one of the things that's really fantastic that makes me feel hopeful, because I always want to be hopeful, is because of the same thing with the technology. It's allowing certain governments to do things. I'm talking about all governments. I'm not even going making stabs at any of them, but in particular, the power to do it is because of their behind the scenes. But you learn that people in countries that our governments may be against each other, are also on social media, like living their days, and they're not like, I'm not thinking about what our government's doing, or I want to come over to America, or the Americans, well, I want to come over to your country. We're not mad at you. And they'll actually say, like, we're not part of this. We don't feel like swaying this country. You never heard that before in the 70s or war. You know what I'm saying? Now someone's gonna get on their phone, they're gonna text like, this isn't
I
our
think
thing.
there's
We didn't pick this government. Like, like we're like America. We're like, we did half of America wants this person, half of America wants this person. You at least see that there's other
well, I also think
opinions.
that I think, yeah, and I think governments have stopped, whether it's a conscious thing or whether it's just the sort of degradation of the system itself, and the system needs serious review from a fundamental perspective. But I think governments have stopped really serving the people, and it's meant to. I mean, your country is completely based on that premise that the government is for and by the people. It's meant to be serving and okay, on a local level, of course, it's still functioning up to a point in that regard, but the kind of government does not seem, it seems to be self-serving. It seems to be
Mhm.
about the corporate interests, the military industrial complex. Of course, as you said, it's, we've always had wars, and those wars may or may not be happening because somebody wants to make some money out of it.
It's all about money. It's all about money. It's always
Yeah,
been money.
so
And
we need fundamental change, because I don't think it's the people. I think,
no,
I mean, I've traveled right across America, and the people are great. They're lovely, lovely people.
yeah,
Welcoming, warm, and interested in other cultures, and intelligent, and aware. But then there's this whole other thing going on, and it's almost like mind control, and it's a globalist thing. It's like you've got to take sides. You're either blue or, and it's blue or red.
you're right.
And it's like, well, can I not be like a mixture of, no, you've got to be blue or red. Well, but I
It's
don't really feel, no, then you're wrong.
there's only
So
two political parties. It's I think one of my favorite phrases I heard, and then I had the artist on. I talked about it was Ian McKay from Fugazi and other bands.
yeah.
He's always been good. He because he lives in Washington too. He said, he always it's not the government's not like that. The government is a business. I like
Mhm.
what you hear, but I thought about it, like, no, he's like, no, it's like a business. It's they're in the business of this. And he started breaking it down, and I had him on the show, and I brought it up. It was one of my favorite quotes. And we started talking about it. I'm like, man, it hits on. In most countries, it's everywhere. It's really just a business. And you start thinking about how they're doing things, even fighting each other in the parties and the lobbying. You're like, oh, it really is just a business. You know,
Yes.
for those people in that, it's like it really is that's just a business, but it's a company that's taking care of itself, and then it trickles off. That makes it almost more digestible for me actually than being so upset because it doesn't, because then it's where the people, it's not where the people, because that's a business. And
Yeah, well, it's this. I mean, that's a direct correlation with the music industry. We could get really upset that labels tend not to be interested in, they tend to be more interested in something that's tried and tested, something that's a little bit more
right, they're
generic.
chasing the one big when it gets out, then they
Because
chase that one till it burns out.
yeah, somebody comes along with something that's really unique and different, and everyone gets a bit shifty because let's have another band that sounds similar to that band, because then we
Yeah,
kind of know there's a market, and we don't have to develop a market, we don't have to take risks. And so artists can get really upset about all that stuff, but as you say, if you understand that it is a business, then you can
yep.
sort of understand, okay, well, that's understandable. Did I say understand 3 times in a row there? I think
I
I
don't
did.
even know. I think I blacked out the first or second one. Not just kidding.
Okay.
So this is a fun conversation. So people listening, sorry we may have deviated because I think we're the kind of people that can really go deep. I'm going to bring us back, of course, a little bit more for the poor label here. We're going to talk about the album before we end it. But
Yes.
and definitely when you come back with your new album, I'm going to have you back. We'll deep dive some more. But
Fantastic.
with the albums coming out, I think it's November 3rd, right? And they're doing
That's
pre-orders.
right.
The link for the where you can get it will be underneath the show on the podcast and on the YouTube channel. So people can click on it and go right to it and order or pre-order it. It's going to be obviously on iTunes and everything else, and YouTube Music, I'm sure, and everything else.
And
Um,
there's vinyl as well, double vinyl that's coming out as well, which is
yeah,
exciting.
so to go at 180 gram or something, I think it's going to be. So,
Yeah.
how are you guys doing the singles and stuff? And any what kind of the promotion and kind of like virtual videos? Obviously, this is an eclectic group of people, so you're not going to do a tour to promote it, but a label's got something behind it because you want because you're competing and you got to get something out there for people to be like, yeah, it's
Yes.
a single. It's more of a reminder of the album than it is just the album because you keep hearing it like, oh, I gotta get that album or that single.
Yeah. I mean, we've had 2 singles out so far. Sunshine of Your Love was the first
Yeah,
one. And that was Joe Bonamassa singing and playing guitar with Ginger Baker on drums, me on piano, Bernie Marsden on guitar, and Neil Murray on bass, and Abbas Dodu on percussion. And then the second single was White Room with Pete Brown singing, and with a bunch of us on that record too, with Clem Clemson from Humble Pie playing guitar. So yes, I mean, the unfortunate thing about this record is that Pete Brown has passed away this year. Ginger Baker passed away. Bernie Marsden just passed away, who was
yeah.
such an amazing guy.
Feels
So
like
we're
a
sort of,
memoriam album is what it does at this point now.
we need some holograms at this point,
Yeah,
So I think you're right. I think the label, released a couple of singles just to get, get some movement, some traction happening.
Which
And
they
I
should.
think
I
it's
mean, it's
just,
a good album, and you want the label to make the money so they can
yeah.
keep putting
I
out
mean, I
good
think
music
they're
because there's
sort
not a
of,
lot of not everyone's putting out good music. So I'm sorry, you want to support this
yeah, no,
album because it's
they're
good.
developing. I think they're kind of just sort of seeing how things unfold. But we've got these two streams. We've got the album and we've got the documentary. The documentary is already available for streaming, I think, in the US.
Is it?
There should be a link for that as well.
I'll check that out myself. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
There's so much out there. Even for someone like me, there's so much out there.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So yes, I think we'll see how it goes. We've been doing a little bit of publicity over the last month or so. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, certainly
Excellent.
we'd love people to check it out.
Definitely. I want people to check out. It's a really good album. I've enjoyed it. I've had pre-listened to it. I've listened to all 15 tracks. Like when I heard acoustic, I got a little anxious, Um, but only because I didn't know what I was getting into. I was like, all right, yeah. And then I'm like, oh, like I just because I'm like, this could go really quick. Like experimental jazz, you just don't know what you're getting into. You could teeter on brilliance,
Yes.
or you could be like, oh, it's like a high school orchestra. Actually, I shouldn't say it because there's some really good high school orchestras. I've heard some great ones, so
There
actually,
are.
I can roll it back actually because I've seen some fantastic ones, and then actually have them play at Berkeley, of School of Music here in Boston.
Oh yeah,
But
Berkeley's great.
yeah. So I do want to add one thing, and I gotta say, one of my favorite things in the world is can you share some Ginger Baker stories or something like experience? Because he is the craziest person. I gotta be honest with you, it may seem cliche to ask a question. I don't usually ask these kind of pedestrian questions, but nothing makes me smile. And other musicians will come on and will laugh over certain Ginger Baker stories or things he's done because there's something about him that's just so animated.
What you want is a bit of controversy to
Not
lead us
even
out of the interview.
just something fun. No, just
No,
like
I'm kidding.
just
I'm kidding.
funny. Even funny, just
No,
because he's just
Ginger was. I love Ginger. I think he's a very misunderstood guy. Um, what can I say about him? I think people don't fully understand. He was in the very early '60s. It's a kind of history. It's a tradition of taking heroin. So he was a registered heroin addict. Um, very early on in his career because the people he was hanging out with in London, um, there was a drummer called Phil Seaman and a bunch of other people, which they were all jazz musicians. So their heroes were
right.
the musicians from the 40s and the 50s who they grew up listening to. I don't know, Charlie Parker, famous heroin addict. And,
Yeah.
there is that tradition. Okay, I'm going to take lots of heroin and
Right.
practice 18 hours a day for 10 years and become the greatest jazz musician that's ever. And, that sort of became a thing. So Ginger followed that very early on. And then went through a series of bands with my father. Alexis Corner, Blues Incorporated, a lot of those early bands that
Right.
predated Creed itself, that a lot of musicians went through. So Charlie Watts was the drummer in Alexis Corner's band, and then when he left to join the Stones, Ginger got the job as the drummer in that band. And then they had a band called the Graham Bond Organization, which John McLaughlin was in at one point as well. So, and they're all kind of
The
this
history is
core
so
of
rich there. It's been crazy.
it's incredible. But when Cream got together, basically so my father and Ginger had been in a couple of bands together already and fallen out and thrown things at each other on the stage and threatened each other and everything. So when I believe that it was Ginger that went to Eric Clapton and said, okay, let's put a band together, and Eric said, well, yes, but only if Jack Bruce is on bass. And so Ginger had to come to my dad sort of with his tail between his legs and say, okay, Jack, let's bury the hatchet and let's do this, because really they were the cream of the crop and they called themselves the Cream. And
Well, the energy between those two guys, the
but
love
one
hate
of the,
is what made them so great. You know what I mean? That was
I think
the energy of
there's
those two.
absolutely an element of that. But one of the provisos of um, if I use that word twice in this interview, I might have done. I don't know why, but anyway, it's a great word. One of the aspects to the band forming was that Ginger had to
I
give
wish I had
up
a word
heroin.
bingo card I
So
could mark it off.
so you should come on. Let's
Bingo.
get this together. Proviso. He's
Understand.
used proviso
Bingo.
twice. Thank goodness for editing. So
Oh, I don't edit.
Ginger actually. they said, okay, we'll put this band together, but Ginger, you've got to give up heroin, and so he did. He gave up heroin, and but by the end of Cream, he sort of started taking it again. I think as they all kind of saw the end in sight. So I think drugs had a lot to do with a lot of those musicians at that point in time, and that
Even
is
in
an
his
interesting
documentary
fact.
at the end, though, when he got some money, he went and bought all those horses. Like, I love how he was always just so out of control. I would just,
Yes, but
I
he
just,
was on one level he was, but on another level he had an innate, a very intelligent person, very aware.
yeah.
And I think that, I mean, I spent a few couple of times with him where he wasn't irate and angry and gruff and all of those things that people that know about Ginger kind of expect from him. I spent a few times where he was just completely down to earth, normal, having a conversation. um, but other times he would and I think it was a front, and I think he didn't, what's the idiom? He didn't suffer fools gladly. So I think as soon he could just read somebody, and if
Right.
somebody was perhaps sycophantic or pretentious or wanted something out of him, he would just go for them, go for the throat in that sense. But if somebody was authentic and didn't act like he was less than Ginger or more than Ginger, I think he really respected people who were just them being themselves.
Well, that makes sense. That
Um,
feels like that would,
but it's a kind of an animalistic thing in that way, because I think we're all a bit like that. If we're in touch with ourselves, we just feel uncomfortable when other people are trying to be manipulative or something. And I think that Ginger just sniffed that out straight away. So he was complex, but I have a series of emails from the last 5-10 years or whatever, because he came to play at a tribute that I did for my dad in 2016. So I was messaging him a little bit around
mhm.
that time. And then I would occasionally, if it was his birthday, I'd send him a little happy birthday, Ginger, from me and my mum, Janet, because he knew my mum, Janet, from the early
Right.
60s himself. So, and he was always really pleasant by email, really polite and respectful.
Yeah, I
So,
don't, yeah, I don't always think he was that guy all the time. Like, to me, I liked him where I liked from my cinema documentaries and the views growing up. To me, is he always felt like obviously like genius, but he always lived by how he felt, and it wasn't about money. It's like what he wanted to do at the moment. Like it's like he was smart. Obviously, he's got to be smart to play the way he played and all the things he did. But he's also his own person. So if he was doing drugs or he bought the horses, like he was in the moment and he was living, and it was exciting and breathing. He wasn't
it's
so
the rebel,
static.
but it's the true rebel, is in a
You don't
sense,
always see that
because
though. Like he was just him.
yeah.
No matter,
But
and
I mean,
that
the
to me,
conformity for conformity's sake is a really unnatural thing to do. Conformity because it raises the vibration in a collective sense, or there are lots of reasons why we would conform to some kind of system, whether it's a societal system or an idea or whatever. But I think Ginger, for whatever reason, maybe his place in history, who he was as an individual, how he saw the world, he didn't want to conform. And so I think that's what you're perhaps describing,
yeah,
saying, okay,
I think that's what it is. I
I'm going to
always
be,
enjoy that.
I'm going to be this kind of like free spirit that's weaving and defining my own
Mhm.
life and how that life works, rather than I've got to fit into that. But then that logic was quite a powerful thing within itself, and so people that were around him had to sort of conform to him as well. So
Well, he did things, and
it's
that's what it is. It's not just about Cream, and I'm talking about you because I shared with you. I was just talking to a musician the other day, and it came up. We were talking about the fact that he's like he would get himself in. He's not actually doing it, but like getting a real nice car, and then while you're leaving the dealership, you just drive into a brick wall, or you drive off a cliff because you want to. Like it's because you're like it would be funny. I just got this car. If I just drove it off a cliff now, it's just, and the humor and the energy of that is just a lot of musicians like that. And to me, it's just that's why I'm tying it in because I could have talked about your dad too,
I
but I'm not about
well,
your
no, I
dad. It's
had a
about
friend.
you. Yeah.
I had a friend who actually is sadly passed on now, but he was a very successful music video director, and he would get, I don't know, some huge budget to direct Diana Ross or something, and
Right.
then he'd like blow it all in one weekend. He'd go to all the really expensive restaurants, buy like $500 meal, and then stub his cigarette out in it and leave and get in a cab and go to a club and just blow it, you know, buy drugs and whatever, and then it's just all gone. And then he'd be like coming around borrowing money off people the next day.
But see,
And
the
that was
fact if
just
I knew
like
his
an
name, I'd
attitude.
be telling stories about him.
But there's
You
something
just know.
amazing about
Yeah,
that.
it's
Yeah.
there's a freedom that some people
But
like. I could
it's a
never do that. I know
destructiveness,
people,
but
right?
yeah.
I know people like that, but I couldn't share that person's story with somebody else because they don't know it. Like Ginger and someone like the other musicians like that or celebrities, everyone knows about it, so it's easy to use that as a focal point to start on your discussion, and that's why I go there. But there's something about that. It's just there's a freedom there as a human being that is more about that than even the story. But we were just talking about when he just bought the got the money, like one of the last shows he needed money, and he just like bought like 30 horses or something crazy. It's like hilariously. I don't know why I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, it
I
was
love it.
the cream reunion. They
Yeah.
made a little bit of money, and yes, he was in South Africa, and he bought like all these polo ponies, and then he was flying people in to play polo with him. You know, I mean, if you make like I don't know what
So
they made, if you make 3 million from reforming a huge band like that, you make 3 or 4 million or something, and it's quite easy to blow it in 6 months or a year, I
well,
would
that's what I'm saying.
imagine.
Like, they even think like he's going to live more than 6 months. He's already gone through this many years, many decades. To know that living that way, it's going to go out in a couple months, and you're going to be broke
But
again.
as you say, there's something quite liberating. Like
Yeah,
we can't take any of, you know, hey man, we can't take any of it with us. You know,
yeah,
it's like,
and he
yeah, but
didn't.
you just blew it all in 6 months, man. What are you doing?
You know, you could have
So
spaced it
yeah,
a little bit
it's
so you went away. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, you know, in a way, there's a kind of nobility in that sort of
Oh, it's
behavior.
great.
I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's sort of noble at the same time.
And guess what? $1 million in earning 30 horses is also ridiculous on some level too, unless it's for a group. So I guess it kind of feels kind of like it all works together for me. You know,
Hey,
um,
it's horses. You know, what can you say?
it is. You know, and I do want to say for people that want listening, we didn't talk about your dad. I love your dad, but I wanted to talk to you about you and the art, you know, and maybe someday we can go there. But there's a lot of great interviews with your dad, and there's no disrespect. It's just talking to you, and I really
Oh
looked your
yeah.
music
Well,
on this.
I'd love to come back and
Yeah,
talk with you again. I've got three
yeah,
minutes till I have to talk to
yeah.
somebody else
No, I
now.
do too. Yeah, yeah. I
But
just want to say thank you for being on the show, man. This is great.
oh
I want to
well,
be. I want to get
thank you
back.
so much for your time.
You know,
Thank you so much, Sean.
have your people reach out when you're your album and stuff.
I'll have
Um,
my people reach out to
there's
your people.
there's no people for me. It's just me. And if I
Okay.
say people, if I say my people, then it's me, and it gets weird. It's like I'm talking to myself, you know, in third person, and then you know Sean doesn't like that. So um, at that point, I'm just saying I'll cut this
I'll
part off
email
at
you,
the end.
or someone will email you.
If you
Yeah,
do it,
absolutely.
I say you will usually say that, but there's usually another person involved. I always get in trouble because I just go to the artist. When you get close to it and you have the music, I can listen to it sooner when you get the streaming link or whatever. I usually like to listen to it like a month before because I actually listen to the music
Yeah,
and like to talk about
yeah,
it,
yeah,
unlike some other people. So to me, as it
yeah.
gets to that process, I actually want to break down the music and talk with your album
Yes,
and promote it as your album. You know, so
I'd love to do something. Yeah,
okay,
let's get into some detail, more
okay,
music next time.
definitely,
Would love that. Thank you.
very good. Thank you. Thank you for being the album. I'll put this right back in. People check out Heavenly Cream, an acoustic tribute to Cream. It's got everybody on it. It's really good. It's not acousticy. It's more like analog Cream to me. I don't even know how to put it. It's just really good. It's really good. It's fun. Yeah, because you're not gonna get more new Cream stuff. So it's just kind of it's a fun take on it. It's very close to it, but it has some creative sparks and some little extra flavors on it, just to shake it up a little bit. It's out now, and click on the links. Thank you for being on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sean. Chat again
Thank
soon.
you.